Welcome to another edition of Chicago Crossing Model Railroad Railcar Reviews. And today we will be looking at a Microtrains 60-foot wooden deck modern flat car in the TTX livery. So I must say, I've been very excited to review this model. It's been sitting around for a couple of months since I really had nothing that I could run it on. The layout was under construction, it still is, but I've brought it down so we can actually do a little bit of a run session with this model. So this model, as you can see, is the 60-foot wood deck modern flat car. It's in the TTX livery. And it also, you can see the catalog number or SKU number, etc. over there. What particularly intrigued me about this model is the application of a simulated wood deck on the flat car. A lot of times flat car models are very dull on top. They will have a plastic or molded deck that is simply the color of the flat car, or it will simply be kind of a beige color to represent wood, but not necessarily to look anything like it. And for me, that's never an issue. I've weathered flat cars quite a bit. I've either applied laser cut wooden deckings to them, or I've just stained and repainted the deck to make it look more realistic with all of the variety that you can get when you have weathered wood. But this one follows in what I think is Microtrains' great strategy of providing some degree of weathering and some degree of additional detail on their models. So let's go ahead and get this thing open and see what we've got cooking. As usual, it comes within a Microtrains jewel case. Here it's got a little bit of a clamshell to hold it in place, pretty typical. And here is the model, and there is the wooden deck, and wow, that is really quite nice. That actually looks about to the level where I've been able to get with doing thin water-based staining and painting of applique decks, but in this case it's nice and flush with the rest of the model itself, so you can't tell that anything was applied. It has metal wheels, it has body-mounted couplings. Seems like quite a bit going on there. The one thing I can tell, and this is the issue I've brought up before with models such as this, where you have the detail integrated into the model, is look at the shine on there. So, this is obviously being held up to a fairly intense light. I don't know whether that would be as much of a problem on a layout. We'll take a look. But you can tell there's a lot of shine there. And that's true for a lot of pre-weathered models. Most of the time, if you're seeing a model weathered to the extent that manufacturers like Microtrains will weather them, then there would probably not be a shiny bit on that model. The spray paint would be dull, the roof would be rusted and dull, the sides would be probably rusted and dull as well as the clear coat degrades. So here, that's something that you can probably manage to mitigate with adding some dull coat or something like that. But out of the box, it looks great, but man, yeah, that shine is really something there. Anyway, let's take a closer look at some of the details on this model. The chassis itself here is metal. The sides may actually just be plastic, but we'll weigh this and see exactly how good it is in terms of matching the weight that something like this needs to be. If we take a look at the overall paint job and we take a look at the details, man, this is nice. You can see a fair bit of patching already applied. And this is not necessarily, I think, meant to quite be a weathered model, although it certainly does look like one. Typical Microtrains weathered models will have rust streaking and other things like that. This predominantly has paint patching. So it kind of fits with manufacturers like Jackson Terminal, etc., who are making cars that are partially weathered or sort of pre-weathered, where you have already the patching integrated, and at that point it's simply up to the owner of the model to decide how much further to go about weathering it. But the patching looks great. The numbers and the lettering on here are quite crisp and legible to the point where you need a magnifier, and I think you can still actually see what all of the text here is. So that all looks very, very sharp and very clean. Like I said, the detail on this wooden deck is really phenomenal. If you don't worry about the shine on the model and instead just look at how this wood looks, this is about as realistic as I've ever seen on a model. And again, is at least the equivalent of having the modeler apply a laser cut wood deck and stain it. The difference there, of course, is you don't get the shine. But man, that looks great. Now let's take a look at some of the applied detail and see what's here. First off, you have some relatively fine stirrups. These feel as if they're plastic, so I'd be a little worried about the durability of those. You also do have a plastic part here. This looks to be, I can't quite tell what that piece of equipment is on the Railcar, simply because I'm not as familiar with flat cars. Nonetheless, that is a plastic applique part. It's probably rather difficult to make that in something like laser cut brass, but man, that would really have added it if you could get it that way. But it is a nice detail. And then again, you have additional rungs and also stirrups, and then you also have a rung up there for somebody to climb up onto. So that is actually a pretty nice detail overall. I'm pretty happy with that level of detail. If you look at the undercarriage, then you can see there's molded detail, including brake rigging, also brake cylinders. You have some of the ribbing, support structure for the model, and that's all pretty good. You see that there are certain premium features here, which include body-mounted couplers. That is not something that Microtrains necessarily has had in a lot of their previous models. And the trucks, the bolsters look pretty good in terms of detail here. The wheels, man, they seem like they're metal. Now, looking at the side over here, the facing side, you can see there are spots available for a couple of additional detail parts that are included in the kit. Or not the kit, but the model. This is actually ready to run, but as is normally the case with Microtrains, they do provide some additional detail parts. And these are incredibly fine detail parts here. What I can see looks to be a cut lever assembly, one for each side. You can see here, based on the sprue, that's probably what plugs into the side, so this is an optional part that you can attach. Also comes with another sprue containing air hoses that you are also able to attach to the model. So a little bit of finish it yourself. I don't really worry about that too much. Probably there are other companies, again, we've seen this with Aurora, etc., where you get the model more or less fully assembled and there's really no additional DIY element to it. But for those of us who at some point in our modeling career have done things with kits, kit cars and stuff like that, this is hardly a thing to concern oneself with. All right, as always, let's grab a scale and let's see how this car does in terms of weight. So this is a 60-foot car, which means it should sit somewhere around 1.18 to 1.2 ounces if it happens to be a NMRA standard weight. So let's go ahead and put that thing on. And we're a little bit underweight, it looks like, by 0.2 ounces, 0.18 ounces or so. Now, if you're running the flat car empty, that means it's probably underweight, of course. If you are planning on putting a load on the thing, then you're probably going to hit the standard okay. So let's talk a little bit about the price point of this model. As I mentioned before, the MSRP for this model is around $34 to $35. You can find these for anywhere between $28 and $29 at your favorite retailer if they're still in stock. So how then does that actually compare to what else is out there? Well, certainly if one looks at, say, the more recent Atlas 60-foot flat cars, which are, of course, a different model. They're not the Thrall cars. They're somewhat different and somewhat older type of model. Those also have body-mounted couplers. They also have metal wheels. They don't have any kind of wooden decking or other detailing like that. So they're very, very simple models where the wood deck is molded simply in the color that the flat car is. Those are somewhere around $23. So you have a $5 difference in terms of the overall detail. You get some of the same functionalities, and of course it's a different model car. Now, there is a much older version of something that looks similar to this, which was an Intermountain model. And those cars, you can find those typically for like $20 right now, I would say. They tend to be quite a bit cheaper. I think I found one model, and again, these are years old, for like $17, $18 over at trains.com. With those, you can actually buy ITLA wooden applique decks that you can put on top of the molded plastic decks, and that's a little bit of an additional expense for sure, but you can then stain that and make it look at least as good as this without worrying about the type of sheen that normally shows up there. So overall, I think in terms of price point, yeah, you're paying a little extra for, you know, some of the little additional details here and for the nice look of that wooden deck. Is it worth it to you? You know, I have no regrets on purchasing this. It's a nice model. It looks good. It feels good in the hands in terms of build quality. So yeah, I think this one's okay. With that in mind, let's go ahead and put it on the track and run it around the layout a little bit. Welcome back to the layout. This is sort of the post-apocalyptic version of Chicago Crossing. There's really just a few buildings on there that I put just so it doesn't look quite so flat for a video like this. In any case, here is our rail car down onto the track, looking quite nice. I will say, you know, a flat car is, if nothing, flat, and therefore any kind of detail that you can have on the decking automatically adds quite a bit. Anyway, let's take a look at how free rolling this is. Metal wheels, it says. So one thing just to keep in mind is this is on the layout is resting on a carpet, so that means that there is unfortunately an uphill grade right now. But certainly if you roll it down the grade a little bit, it just kind of keeps going. That's really nice. So seems reasonably free rolling. What we're going to do now is get it coupled up. I've got a Indiana Harbor Belt GP38 and a transfer caboose on the other side. So we'll go ahead, get these things all coupled up together. The transfer caboose in, and we'll go ahead and move the locomotive in and see how we do here. As always, it's N scale. Expectations are somewhat limited. Well, bounced him around real good. It's the problem of free rolling very, very light models. All right. In any case, this transfer caboose here is a different manufacturer. I think that's a Bluford Shops model, so everything coupled up nicely. There actually are no issues with coupler height that I can see. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get this thing moving around the track and see how we do.